Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is the fourth day of the semester 3 presentations. Today, the subject is postcolonial studies, and the following students would be presenting their topics regarding the same. We will first have Unnati Baroliyya, who would be presenting on literary convergences, unpacking intertextuality, and J.M. Coetzee's 4. Then we'll have NAIK, who will be presenting on exploring female voices and silence in White Sargasso Sea. Next, we will have BHATT, who will be presenting on globalization and fiction, redefining postcolonial narratives in a globalized world. Then we'll have RAHUL DESAI, who would be presenting on the Gothic and supernatural elements in White Sargasso Sea. Next, we'll have PRIYANSHIBA GOHIL, who would be presenting on postcolonial feminism, silence and storytelling in J.M. Coetzee's 4. Next, PALLAVI PARMAR would be presenting on rooted in landscape, role of place in White Sargasso Sea. Next, KUSUM SARAVAIYA would be presenting on comparative analysis, Fanon and Gandhi on decolonization. KHUSHI Rathod would be the next presenter, and she would be presenting Friday as a subaltern character. Next, Jai Solanki would be presenting on the role of the unreliable narrator in White Sargasso Sea. Jai Marunia would be presenting on exploring the woman's voice and identity in Jean Rees's White Sargasso Sea. Jatin Baru would be presenting on frames of freedom, post-colonial narratives in Indian cinema. Himali Parmar presenting on the psychology of liberation, Frans Fanon's vision in The Wretched of the Earth. And Divya Jadhav will be presenting on post-colonial studies from historical roots to global futures. And finally, Rathod will be presenting on the future of post-colonial studies. I now invite Ms. Unnati Baroliyya to present her topic.
Okay, so very good afternoon, everyone. I'm Unnati Baroliyya, and today I'll be dealing with the topic literary convergence, unpacking intertextuality in J.M. Coetzee's poem. These are my personal information, my research question. How does J.M. Coetzee's poem use the concept of intertextuality to change the dominant narratives and subvert the colonialist discourse in Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe? My hypothesis is J.M. Coetzee's poem employs intertextuality as a postmodern tool to reframe and deconstruct the narratives in Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. Through this subversion, Foy challenges the nation of realism, exposes the constructed nature of narrative authority, and reclaims the suppressed perspective of colonized subject. Yes, my table of content and introduction. Yes, introduction is all about the novel Foy, which was in 1986, and the one which I'll be working with another, that is the Robinson Crusoe. Focusing on the untold stories and marginalized voices in original voices in the original text, and how and central to Coetzee's narrative is the concept of intertextuality, a literary technique that emphasizes the relationship between the different texts and the ways in which they influence and reshape each other. Okay, so yes, the novel raises the question about authorship, colonialism, and the representation of truth, positioning itself as a critic of the dominant narratives to have shaped Western literature. So yes, before starting my main point, I would like to just briefly want to just share about both the novels, like how they are interconnected. Robinson Crusoe, in that the novel is about a main character, Robinson, who is voyaging at a is on a voyage, and his father was a wealthy man, so he never stopped him from doing his whatever passion he used to, like he used to follow, his father was allowing him. So yes, in the same way, he just used to voyage on the islands, and at that time, he at one island he used to stay for 23 years or some at for longer years, and there he meets one black, that is the name whose name was Friday, and at that time he used to just in the first voyage he was all alone, and in the second time he met the black, that is Friday, and the same after that it is connected the in the foy, it is like elaborated with the character of Sushan, who is she is on she, and now the another novel begins, that is Foy, and how she is on in a search for her daughter, and she is on search for the daughter, yes, and is he is lost on that island and meets the Friday and Robinson. So yes, Crusoe, sorry, and yes, I hope we all know the story of Foy, so we can like interconnect this. Yes. So, beginning with the very first topic, that is defining intertextuality, exploring the theoretical framework. Intertextuality, that how the word, the word was coined by Julia Kristeva, emphasizing the interconnectedness of text, highlighting how they draw upon and transform existing literary traditions. Like in both the novel we can see the same theme of colonialism and suppression of blacks, and we can see that in and reinterpretation and transformation. Intertextuality involves a dynamic process of reinterpretation where the borrowed elements are reshaped and recontextualized with the new narrative. That we can see that how Robinson Crusoe is ending and is having the same scenario and of islands, and there's only addition of a character, that is Sushan, and also addition of a foe in that, and her daughter, search for the daughter and all. So the story is how interconnected, the theme is almost like same. So yes, another one, the colonial intertext, Robinson Crusoe and its reverberations. So colonial power dynamics, that how Robinson Crusoe reflects the colonial ideology of its time, depicting the encounter between the European colonizers and the primitive native. Like here we can see the rise of the Europeans and how they used to suppress the Africans and the natives. So at that time, Europe was at a great peak of their success. So they were trading and all of them, and slavings, black slavings of black. Themes of isolation and survival. Themes of, yes, we can see in the character of isolation. Yes, it was a personal choice of obviously Crusoe, of this isolation, but survival we can see in Sushan also, and yes, in Friday also. Gendered the perspectives, giving voice to Friday and Sushan Barton. Yes, so the Friday, who the native of Robinson Crusoe, and his voice previously silenced is given a platform in Foy. Like how in Robinson Crusoe, Friday was not considered, like not given that much importance or anything in that. But here in Foy, we can see that he is being like considered with help of the character Sushan, that how she is trying to help him to make him speak and all that. Sushan Barton, the protagonist of Poe, she challenges the male dominated narrative of Robinson Crusoe. Yes, in which the we can see the difference in Crusoe and metaphysical devices blurring the lines of authorship. That unreliable narrator, Coetzee employs an unreliable narrator, further complicating the relationship between the reader and the narrative. So yes, questioning authority, that how Four challenges the traditional authority of author, and inviting the readers to question the nature and storytelling. That how Four is in Crusoe, like Four, yes, the Four in character Four is like how he is telling Sushan that no, tell me some other story so that readers would found it like interesting and would prefer to have. So there we can find blurring reality and fiction. The novel blurs the lines between the reality and fiction, constantly reminding the readers that story is a contrast. Post-colonial echoes, challenging colonial narratives. That how colonial discourses, Coetzee engages with the legacy of colonial discourse, expressing the power dynamics and cultural biases that shaped colonial narratives. Challenging Eurocentric views, that how Four deconstructs Eurocentric perspectives, offering a counter narrative that challenges the dominant colonial narrative, and reclaiming agencies, that by giving voice to the marginalized, Coetzee reclaims agency for those who have been historically silenced by colonial narratives. Okay. Over here, I would like to conclude by Coates not only critiques the dominant narratives of Western imperialism, but also challenges the traditional authority of the author. His postmodern reworking of the text reveals the constructed nature of realism and highlights the possibilities of rewriting history and literature from marginalized perspectives. Ultimately, Ford demonstrates how intertextuality can be a tool for uncovering hidden histories and rethinking the power dynamics encountered in the colonial literary works. So, this are my references. And thank you. Now, I'm open for questions.
My question is that how does Coetzee use intertextuality to critique colonialism?
Okay, Coetzee use intertextuality to critique colonialism. In a way, yes. We can see through the character of Friday, Sushan, also because as how her daughter was kidnapped by the whites, and Friday being slaved and was also abused. So yes, that was the effect we can see on the people as well, characters also. Yes. Next.
The question is that what role does the character of Friday play in the intertextual critique?
Okay. Talking about the both the novels, that is Robinson Crusoe and Foe. In both, Friday is there. Friday as a character is there. But in Robinson Crusoe, he is not being taken into much consideration, like is not talked much about it. So, and whereas in Foe, he is being uh, through the character of Sushan, he is being treated in a way of giving him a chance to open up that, but because of his tongue being abused by the Europeans, so as a slave, and we can see that. Thank you.
I was about to ring, I had my hand on the bed. Yeah, maybe the batch place there. Yeah, so liberal kind of thing. Let's see how it goes.
Hello everyone, my topic is exploring female voices and silence in White Sargasso Sea. These are my personal information. Research question: how do female voices and silence in White Sargasso Sea reflect the struggles and resistance of women within patriarchal and colonial systems? Hypothesis: in White Sargasso Sea, the silencing and displacement of female voices serve as a powerful critique of colonialism and patriarchy, illustrating how women's struggle for identity and autonomy are shaped by the both societal and cultural forces. These are the table of contents. Introduction. Jean Rhys, writing style, lyrical, melancholic, prose focusing on alienation, colonialism, gender, and power. Legacy. Known for exploring marginalized voice, Rhys became an iconic of feminist and post-colonial literature. White Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys is a renowned novel inspired by the theme and characters of Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre and Antoinette Mason, a West Indian woman, marries Mr. Rochester, goes mad, and is confined to Thornfield attic as a mad woman in the attic from Jane Eyre. Feminist perspective in White Sargasso Sea. Feminist lens on power and silence. In feminist lens on power and silence, we can see the protagonist of the novel, Antoinette. She in the novel faces many struggle because of her husband Rochester. Also, she experience of struggles, and particularly in colonial context. Female voices in operation. Antoinette's silence can be seen as both a form of resistance and submission. The novel portrays her as a victim of not only racial but colonial exploitation, but also of gender-based repression. In this is I take from the original line from novel. I hate you, I hate you, I will never forgive you. This line is said by Antoinette to her husband Rochester. This is telling that she faces a betrayal from her husband. Her husband cheated her, and in response, she is telling to her husband. This outburst through rare shows a brief but powerful voice of rebellion, a moment of reclaiming her agency, even in a space where women's emotions and voices are suppressed. The silence was the worst of it, the silence between us. This line also in the novel told by Antoinette to her husband Rochester, that there are many issues in their married life, and at that point she just give up to telling something to her husband. This reflects the oppressive force of silence in relationship where female voices are stiffed, leaving the woman in a state of emotional and psychological suffocation. Female struggle with the White Sargasso Sea. Theme of patriarchy and control. In this, we can see the patriarchy as Antoinette's husband, Rochester. The White Sargasso Sea, the female characters, especially Antoinette, experience a struggle against the oppressive structure of patriarchy that seeks to silence them. Struggle for identity. Antoinette's sense of self is fractured by the colonial and familiar pressures placed on her. Her fight for personal autonomy is shifted by both her mother's mental instability, by her husband's cruelty. These lines I take from the original novel. I was not used to being in a room with people who did not want me there. This is the line which shows the isolation of Antoinette, in which the space around her becomes one of alienation rather than belonging, symbolizing her struggle for a voice in a world that silences her. You are not my kind of woman. This statement from Rochester reinforces the gendered and racial dynamics that alienate Antoinette, showing how she is denied agency both as a woman and as a person of her heritage. Trapped by society, a comparison of Annette and Antoinette. Annette is the mother of Antoinette. In the novel, the isolation, the mother and daughter, they both faces isolation. Like Annette faces as socially and emotionally isolated, and Antoinette faces isolation as emotionally and physically. Madness causes by loss about son and social rejection. Annette faces that she loses her son and just in a pressure of society she just isolate, and it's the result of is she is just going to mad. And in the case of Annette, we can see the causes of betrayal and identity loss. In the last, we can see that just no Antoinette replaced her name that Antoinette to Bertha. Patriarchy controlled and ignored by Mr. Mason. And in the case of Antoinette, she is just controlled by her husband. Losses and rebellion. In the Annette, we can see a passive and unable to resist, and losses because Annette loses her son and husband, and Antoinette loses his identity and freedom. Marriage. Annette's marriage in the starting of the novel, it was a hopeful start and ends in a disappear. And in the Antoinette, it is just a disaster ending. And cultural alienation, rejected as an outsider by society, and the Antoinette rejected due to mixed heritage. Imprisonment in the, we can see that Annette was trapped in a marriage and Antoinette trapped as locked in the attic and isolated. Feminine resistance and isolation. Christophine as a feminist figure. In the Christophine, we can see that she is just a woman who can speak, but because of her, she was marginalized. She has not voice to speak out and stand in the society. Symbolism of isolation. In symbolism of isolation, we can see that Antoinette and Annette, they both were isolated. Feminine strength and solidarity. Christophine and Aunt Cora stand as the counterpoints to male dominance, offering Antoinette's moments of empowerment. Antoinette's silenced voice and cultural displacement. Antoinette's silenced identity. In that, we can see that she just, in the last of the novel, just changed her identity, her name to Antoinette to Bertha. And cultural alienation and silence, Antoinette's mixed heritage isolates her from both white colonial society and black communist. And her alienation mirrors broader themes of colonial oppression, where culture in betweenness suppress individuality and self-exploration. Conclusion. In conclusion, White Sargasso shows how women's voices are often silenced by both patriarchy and colonialism. Through the experiences of Antoinette and Annette, we see how women struggle with isolation, identity loss, and being controlled by society. Despite these challenges, the novel also shows moments of resistance and strength. Overall, it highlights the importance of giving women a voice and challenges the system that keep them oppressed. These are my references. Thank you. Now, if you have any question, you can ask me.
How does Antoinette's struggles against patriarchal control lead to her mental breakdown?
Antoinette's struggles against patriarchal, first of his struggle was in her own home, that she is not her marriage was not a kind of a happy marriage. She faces many issues in her marriage. She faces betrayed by her husband, and her husband also cheats her to that she was in love with the Emily, and her husband was not giving importance or giving sympathies to the Antoinette, and she was not happy in that, and she was trapped in that marriage life. And in the last, we can see her outburst that in the novel we can see an open ending, but as a nightmare we can see that she just go with the candle and just imagine that her house was burned out.
Trupti, how do Antoinette and Christophine navigate the dynamics of voice and silence in their interactions?
In the Antoinette, she has some power, but because of her husband, she was not raising her voice, and she was. Case we can see that she just openly said about Rochester, but because she was the marginalized, she just can't do with this, and she just accept this what society does. Okay, thank you.
So, very good afternoon to all of you on the very fourth day of our presentation seminar. I am going to present myself on the topic globalization and fiction, redefining post-colonial narratives in a globalized world. Yes, these are my academic information. And if we begin with the introduction, then firstly, let us introduce with the term globalization. It is a basically concept that is in a way complex and ever evolving concept. Yes, and it also challenges the traditional post-colonial frameworks. Yes, and that was rely on the notion of margin and the centers. Yes, this definition I have taken from the Anya Lumba's book. Yes, globalization also represent the economic, cultural, and political interconnectedness that has increasingly shaped the modern world, influencing cultural identity and artistic expression across the borders. Yes, in literature also we find that post-colonial kind of fiction emerges as a profound response to globalization, originating from the formerly colonized society, and it also exploring the themes such as identity and power and resistance and hybridity and so on. This kind of genre is critically examine how global forces interact with the local traditions, and also offering the narratives that reflect the complexity that challenges of navigating a globalized world while preserving unique cultural heritage. Yes. Here are my research question and hypothesis. So, in this presentation, my hypothesis is globalization, how it has it's reshaped the colonial narrative by frustrating hybridity, eroding cultural boundaries, and challenging traditional notions of identity, while also perpetuating new forms of cultural hegemony and migration in the fiction. Yes, if we look about on this theatrical framework, then we have three major well-known writer. Yes, Edward Said, Omike Bhabha, and Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. If we look about the concept of Edward Said and Orientalism, then it focuses on the creation of the other. Yes, by Western narratives, a progress that persists in globalized fiction. Yes, Said would also argue that globalization often replicates colonial structures of knowledge and power. Yes, if we look on the cultural imperialism, then Said's concept of this cultural hegemony suggests that globalization facilitates the dissemination of the Western culture dominance under the uh, um, universalism. And the fiction we can find that this might manifest as a periodism and westernized post-colonial narratives that appealed to global audience over the of these stories. Yes. Homike Bhaba's concept of hybridity, that also we find that how he reflects the fiction in a globalized world, which reflects in between kind of things. Yes, Globalization implies this hybrid space for allowing writers to explore negotiation of identity and transition context, yes, and mimicry and subposition. Also we can find that in globalized literary market, mimicry emerges in a way that in a way it is a strategy for the post-colonial writers who adopt dominant literary forms while subverting their content. Yes, Baba would view globalized fiction as an opportunity for the post-colonial writers to mimic the Western forms, that is novel and short stories and such kind of things. Yes, while embedding subversive critics of globalization itself. Yes, then Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, we all know about this subaltern theory. Yes, how she in a way critique the way globalization often prioritize the market-driven stories that center Western audience. Yes, in a way, and silencing truly subaltern perspective. Yes, and unlearn privilege we also find. And if we talk about these politics of representation, then Spivak also challenged that hegemonizing the tendencies of globalization, which can erase the indigenous and subaltern identities in favor of commodified the global post-colonial narrative. Yes, and strategic essentialism also we can find that his concept on this could be used by the marginalized writers to create the unified voice for advocacy while still criticizing the global system that enforcing the reductive representations. Yes, main themes that we find in post-colonial fiction or narrative, that is hybridity and identity. Yes, post-colonial structure narratives are in a way mainly focus on the identity in the concept of this globalization. Yes, and character navigate their dual and mixed cultural identity. Yes, for example, this Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children. Yes, and cultural hegemony also we find that in globalization, uh, the dominance of Western cultures and ideologies and marginalizing and tradition and local narratives. Yes, the example of the Arundhati Roy's The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, that we find how, in a way, Arundhati Roy critiques the global capitalism and politics of the India. Yes, and also represent the global and complex local cultures. Yes, showcasing the tension between global dominion and the local resistance. Okay, the themes in again resistance and migration and post-colonial themes, economical, um, globalization and post-colonial narrative. And in case study, we have this the Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children, how the Salim Sinai's fragmented identity and hybridization and historical rewriting. We find that the concept that represent the in-between kind of situation. Yes, that how in a way Salim's life is going on, that like he is living in the family which has Indian culture but also influencing the British things and facing so many things and fragmented identity also we can find at this. And if we look upon the globalization and its effect, then cultural interconnectivity, economic and political globalization, and diasporic perspective also we find. Yes, and Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things also we find the settings and tradition. Yes, how it is rooted in village of IMLM. Yes, caste and social structure also we find that how caste system is representing in this Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things. Yes, these forbidding relationships between these Ammo and Velutha. Yes, reflects deeply ingrained local traditions. Yes, global cultural forces also we find this colonial legacy. Yes, the how it is the influenced under the British colonial rules. And this character Baby Kochama shows the Western culture. Yes, and remnants of the colonial architecture and lifestyle, globalization and its impact. Also, we find the spread of English education and foreign food and cultural tradition clashing with the traditional ways of life and so on. Continuing, we also find in Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, hybrid identities also, mix of local and global influences. Example in the example of Rahel and Esther's lives, critique of modernity. Also, we find Roy. Arundhati Roy, how critic the globalization commodified the local cultures, and how his house transformation into the tourist place. Yes, and significance also we find that how Eminem explore the global cultural forces, reshape local identity and traditions. Yes, and it is very famous quote by Arjun Appadurai, that globalization in the sense of increasing cultural interaction and exchange. It is in fact and enabling force for the flow of ideas, identity, and people in many directions. In conclusion, finally, we can say that through the works like Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children and Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, the story critique the pervasive impact of global capitalism and cultural hegemony, while preserving a nuance of these cultural identity. Ultimately, post-colonial fiction provides a vital lens for examining the complexity of identity, power, and resistance in a globalized world. Yes. So here are my references, and thank you. If you have any question, then floor is open for question.
Yeah, my question is, if Midnight Children and the God of Small Things were written today, how might they address modern globalization trends like social media or AI's influence on culture?
Yes, Trupti, my answer to you is, as we all know that AI and media culture nowadays is going very famous in today's world, right? We are not imagine ourselves without this AI and multimedia. Like after a few seconds, we feels like, wait a minute, let me check social media, and that so that AI influence and cultural social media also influence in the narrative structure of these Midnight Children, especially, and God of Small Things. Say, for example, in Midnight Children, we find that Salim's identity also. In a way, suppose going to affect by the social media and the AI, that he in a way facing many problems in original novel, but after influencing by the social media, he in a way affect more. And also in a way, God of Small Things, we find this relationship between Rahel and Esther takes some unique step that reflects in these novels. So that is how it is going to affect.
Ria, can hybridity in postcolonial fiction can be seen as a form of resistance, or does it risk diluting cultural authenticity?
Yes, hybridity in a way in the post-colonial fiction can be formed as a resistance in a form of identity and hybridity and so many cases. But in a way, the risk of authenticity is always be there in a case of this globalization world. Because in a way, we know that how globalization works. That every time something new arrives in, say, for example, in the contemporary time, if you look about this AI, then AI after inventing this AI and kind of things, how we can rely on this individual work that it is authentic. So in a way, hybridity in post-colonial fiction and all the things are resistance, but the question of authenticity is in a way is risky. So that is it from my side. Thank you.
Well,
So, hello everyone, my name is Rahul Desai, and today I'm presenting my presentation on the very famous and interesting topic of the Gothic and supernatural elements in Wild Sargasso Sea novel. These are the personal information, table of content which I discuss in this presentation, and my research question and hypothesis. Hypothesis like the integration of Gothic and supernatural elements in Wild Sargasso Sea serve as a narrative device to explore the theme like identity, madness, isolation, and colonial oppression, and many more things. Let's start with about introduction of author. Jean Rhys. Jean Rhys, known as a West Indian novelist, and 1920s to 1930s Europe and the West Indies. And her first book, The Left Bank, was followed by the novels like Postures and Good Morning Midnights. And then Rhys had she very well known as her prose style and a unique narrative technique, which her use in her work, and many more things. Yes. Then we can see about the introduction of the novel. This novel, Wild Sargasso Sea, published in the 1966, inspired by the Jane Eyre. This novel, also known as the prequel to Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte. Antoinette, a West Indies, marries an Englishman, moves to England. Her husband confines her to attic at the Thornfield. Thornfield, name of the place, which happened the horrible things at that place. This novel explores the many themes, interesting themes like marriage, madness, isolation, mental illness of Antoinette, then freedom and entrampment, isolation, and colonial oppression also. Then we can see about the Gothic setting in this novel. Gothic setting, like this novel set in the Jamaican like Caribbean place. Jane Rhys also tell about the mad woman in the attic. Mad woman in the attic. It means like the Antoinette, one of the character of this novel. Antoinette also faced the rejection by the society, rejection by her husband, rejection of colonial operations, post-colonial operations, and many more things. Then Wild Sargasso Sea, Red finds Gothic like typical. In this novel, we can find also about the typical darkness of the desire, darkness of the expectations through the society, from the husband, from the character also. And very well interesting about the narrative structure of this novel, about the Gothic and supernatural natural atmosphere in this novel. Then second, we can find about the isolation and madness in this novel. Isolation and madness also created the Gothic and supernatural natural thoughts throughout the characters. Character like Antoinette, known as a in this novel, Creole woman. Creole woman is in her place in the liminal place space. In this novel, we can find Antoinette, and then she faces many identity crises, madness crises, thought crises, and rejection crises, racial lines crises through the colonial operations, and her husband's operation, thought, thinking process or perspective, and many more things. Antoinette also don't make interpretation between societal expectation and colonial oppression, lead to Antoinette's psychological distress. Her turbulent relationships and rejection also depend on the impact on her mindset, and also yes, the supernatural and folklore. We can find also the supernatural and folklore in this novel, like the about the dark magic and Obeah by the Christophine. Antoinette make Obeah through Christophine to to love she want to love her husband, husband love her, and she said the very lovable and peaceful life throughout the novel. Christopher expresses in Obeya practice and spell casting gives her unique powers, power to love her husband, and husband also love her. Husband listen to her, and many more things. The motif of witchcraft is a metaphor for the relationship between language and power. Yes, Antoinette also faced the language barrier and the power barrier to the her husband and other white English colonizers. Unreliable narration and psychological horror. Jean Royce also unrevealed the Bertha's past, highlighting the perceived past about the madness and colonial rules and rejection. Novel challenges the colonial and patriarchal perspective by giving Bertha's agency. Then we can also the Caribbean see the Caribbean setting and juxtaposition of stifling atmosphere of dark desire and typical darkness around the Antoinette and Antoinette's madness and thoughts. This kinds of thought very well deep impact on the character internal turmoil and the external world on the character Antoinette. The role of fire. The role of fire very interestingly spread in this novel. Antoinette's whole childhood destroyed by the fire, and her mother also become the incense by the symbolizing of fire. Antoinette is confined at the Thornfield Hall. She dreams at the end of the novel. At the end of the novel, we can also identify the Thornfield Hall and dreaming. She dreaming to burning down all the candles and burning down all the house. Yes, imagine being back to Pallavi and recalling its furnishing and artifacts. She attempts to save her beloved parrot Coco, symbolizing her deep entrapment and confinement. Antoinette, as a Creole woman, faces rejection from both Jamaicans and white English men's colonizers. Annette feels also marooned and trapped at Colibri estate after her husband's death. Marooned is also embodies or aborded to her mother, her husband, and her own thoughts and creation also. In the conclusion, we can identify that instead of reliving of definitely reality, the novel numerous voices and opposing points of view appear in the secret. Obeya, Caribbean magic linked to madness and spiritual death, if featured in the book. These are the works cited, and thank you. If you have any question, you can ask me.
My question is, how does phobia contribute to the Gothic elements in white Sargasso?
Yes, Obeya also creates the horror and horrible thoughts or horrible atmosphere throughout the novel, throughout the character like Antoinette and Annette also. And Antoinette also explore the fear and control to another hand, like her husband, her mother also control her, and yes, Obeya contribute to this kind of Gothic elements in this novel.
So now my question is, how does societal rejection influence Antoinette's mental state in the novel?
Yes, my answer is that societal rejection is very well impact on the on her thinking process and thoughts also. Societal rejection also create the madness, isolation, and isolation, madness, and her thinking process also. And also impact on the racism line and religious line also. So thank you. This is from my side.
Hello everyone, I am PRIYANSHIBA and today I am going to give presentation on the topic post-colonial feminism, silence and storytelling in J.M. Coetzee's 4. These are my personal information. These are the table of the contents. Research question: how does J.M. Coetzee's 4 explore the intersection of silence, storytelling, and power to critique colonial and patriarchal system from a post-colonial feminist perspective? Hypothesis: J.M. Coetzee's 4 uses the silence of marginalized character, particularly Friday and Susan Barton, to highlight the erasure of voices in colonial and patriarchal narratives, suggesting that storytelling is both a means of agency and a site of power struggles in post-colonial feminist discourse. Introduction of the J.M. Coetzee. He was a South African novelist, critics, and translator. He was also known as John Maxwell Coetzee, and he also noted for his novel about effect of colonization, and he also received many awards and honors. And his notable works, which include in Age of Iron, Diary of a Bad Year, Disgrace, Poe, Here and Now, Letters, 2008 to 2011, Life and Times of Michael K., and many others. So first, J.M. Coetzee's poem. So as we know that J.M. Coetzee poem published in 1986, and it is a reimagining of Daniel Defoe's classical novel Robinson Crusoe. The novel story revolves around the character of Susan Barton, Crusoe, Friday, and poem. Susan Barton is a woman who finds herself shipwrecked on an island with Crusoe, and she also represented the silence voice of women in history and literature. And second one is Crusoe. Crusoe is the ruler of the island, and unlike Defoe's adventurous and resourceful Crusoe, Coetzee's Crusoe is depicted as a man who has lost all desire to escape the island and is content with his monotonous life of building terrace. Then third one is a Friday. Friday is a mute servant whose tongue has been cut out, and the fourth one character is a Foy. Foy is a fictional version of the author Daniel Defoe. And when Susan determined to return to England and tell her story, but she faces numerous challenges, including the indifference of Crusoe and the silence of Friday. So, feminism and post-colonial feminism. Feminism focuses on women's rights and gender equality, often from a Western-centric perspective, and post-colonial feminism focuses on women's experience in post-colonial context, emphasizing race, class, and historical legacies. And both feminism and post-colonial feminism represented universal sisterhood. And Feminism and post-colonial feminism both emphasize key issue of gender inequality, patriarchy, workplace right, and reproductive rights and sexuality. And in feminism, key figures include Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and on other side, post-colonial feminism include key figures like Rajeshwari Sundararajan, Chandra Talpade Mohanty. In the word of Louise Rushin, post-colonial feminist approaches unpack the culture, historical, social, and economic factors that intersect to shape different oppressive contexts that affect health and well-being. So now, post-colonial feminism in 4. As we know that the novel requires the dual reading, emphasizing feminist and post-colonial themes, and through two colonialist ideologies in the character of Susan Barton and Friday. According to Helen Tiffin, however, Coetzee in this novel is writing back not only to an English colonial text but to the whole of the discursive field within which such a text operated and continue to operate in post-colonial words. And Susan resists male authorship and negotiates her native with Daniel Foe. Characters of Friday in James Coetzee's 4. As we know that Friday is lost his tongue and violated by his master Crusoe and slaves, and his silence representing his inability to speak. He lost his tongue, and now he was a voicelessness and cannot speak, and as a colonial figure, he was marginalized by race. As Alex Boehmer argues that the violated body of the colonized speaks, representing its own silence. The colonized body speaks, uttering its bounds, and it negates its muted condition. Arthur Frank similarly argues the ill body is certainly not mute. It speaks eloquently in pains and symptoms, but inarticulate. Also, Susan calls him a hole in the narrative, indicating his absence and silence in the story. Themes of silence in 4. Silence is oppression. Friday's muteness represented the enforced silence of the colonized, and his inability to speak is a direct result of colonial violence, symbolizing the broader silencing of colonized people and silence as resistance. Friday's silence is not just a sign of oppression, but also a form of resistance. By refusing to speak, Friday resists the colonial language and narrative imposed upon him. This resistance is a powerful statement against the colonial attempt to define and control his identity. The ambiguity of silence. Susan Barton struggled to tell her story, and Friday's silence create a complex interplay of voices and silence. On the other side, the silence also symbolizes storytelling. Susan's narrative is constantly challenged by the dominant male voices of Crusoe and Poe, reflecting the border patriarchal and colonial structure that seeks to silence marginalized voices. Susan contrasts Friday's helpless silence with her own purposeful silence, whereas the silence I keep regarding Bahia and other matters is chosen and purposeful. It is my own silence. Storytelling as a power. Susan Barton, protagonist, struggled to have her story told and recognized. Her narrative is constantly changed by the dominant male voice of Crusoe and Poe, reflecting the border patriarchal and colonial structure that seeks to silence marginalized voice, storytelling, and identity. Susan attempts to narrate her experience are also attempts to assert her identity and agency, but however, her narrative is often co-opted and reshaped by others, particularly by Poe, who represented the colonial and patriarchal forces that seeks to control and define her story. Desire for freedom.
Susan aspires to be a free woman who asserts her freedom by telling her story according to her own desire. But she recognized the need for the artificial, of a writer like Poe to make her story marketable. Conclusion in Foe, J.M. Coetzee intertwines a post-colonial and feminist theme, highlighting the shared struggle of women and the colonized against silencing and othering by dominant ideologies. Through Susan Barton's resistance to patriarchal authorship and Friday's silence but profound presence, the novel critique colonialist and patriarchal systems it undergoes the importance of alternative forms of storytelling where silence itself became a form of resistance. By aligning feminism with post-colonialism, Coetzee amplifies the political and ideological depth of the novel, making it a powerful commentary on the intersection of gender, race, and power. These are my references, and thank you. Now, if you have any questions, then feel free to ask.
So, Priyanshi, my question is, can you suggest J.M. Coetzee's other novels which focus on the themes like silence and storytelling?
Okay. J.M. Coetzee often deal with the theme of silence and storytelling to examine the power and resistance. In J.M. Coetzee's novels like Waiting for the Barbarians, Disgrace, the Life and Time of the Michael K. In their novel, particularly in Waiting for the Barbarian, in this novel, the silence colonial power. Colonized people and their struggle, and Disgrace in Disgrace, Lucy's character and Lucy's silence reflects her pain and trauma, and also the lifetime of Michael K. In protagonist challenging societal norms. So in this way, J.M. Coetzee focuses on the theme of silence and storytelling in all of the novel. Next.
Priyanshi, my question is, how does Friday's silence symbolize in Robinson Crusoe, and how it shaped in the narrative exploration of the power and agency?
So in the novel, J.M. Coetzee's Foe, the character of Friday's silence symbolize how the colonial people are silenced and ignored, since his tongue was cut, and he cannot speak, and he was a voicelessness. It shows the power of people who dominate colonized people, and on other the character like Susan and Poe also control Friday to about his history. That's from my side.
Hello everyone, I am PALLAVI PARMAR, and today I am going to deal with the topic rooted in the landscape, the role of place in White Sargasso Sea. These are my personal information, table of contents. Let's firstly discuss about my research question. My research question is, how do the landscapes in White Sargasso Sea reflect Antoinette's identity struggles, cultural displacement and resistance to colonial and patriarchal oppression? Hypothesis is the landscapes in White Sargasso Sea serve as a more than just a setting. They are symbolic reflections of identity, cultural tension, and resistance. The interplay between the Caribbean and the English landscapes shapes Antoinette's emotional and psychological journey, critiquing colonialism and patriarchy. Uh, so I'm not going to deal with genres, as Rahul Bhai earlier mentioned that. Also about White Sargasso Sea, he's also discussed about that. So moving toward main focus on of my presentation, significance of the, let's firstly see significance of the title White Sargasso Sea. So it's depicting geographic symbolism. Like the Sargasso Sea, located in the North Atlantic Ocean, is a shoreless body of water surrounded by ocean currents. Its physical isolation symbolizes the protagonist Antoinette's sense of displacement and her inability to find a stable identity or harbor. Like in the Atlantic Ocean, North Atlantic Ocean, there is a part of ocean where is a there were seaweeds. So there is a still water, and ship cannot move from that area. So it locates the Antoinette's sense of displacement and inability to stable identity. Sargasso Sea is a shoreless body of water, and it represents that trap. Antoinette is trapped in between two cultures, European and Creole, without fitting into either. She is not find that she is completely from from any one culture. The word wide emphasizes that her isolation and the emotional distance between her and others. Thus, the sea link, the mystery and shipwrecks mirror her doomed fate and chaotic life. It highlights her identity crisis and search for self in a world that rejects her. Let's see about place and identity, like the role of Dominica as the genre also belonging from Dominica. So we can find that she inspired from Dominica, and she describes Antoinette as she reference she belonging from both culture, Dominica and Jamaican. The depiction of that landscape integral in the shaping Antoinette's Creole identity. A stage of evolution, we can find that initial displacement when Antoinette feels alienated and threatened by environment. Like at first, when she is in her childhood, she feels that displacement. Conflicted affinity. Over time, she develops that complex connection to the land, navigating cultural tensions and a final empowerment. Like she is not able to, throughout the novel, she is not able to connect herself with any places. So at finally, she stand for she take a stand for herself, and we can find final empowerment. Colonialism and landscape in Antoinette's story. Like we can find that Antoinette's memories in Dominica or Jamaica shape her identity, connecting her past and present. Like cultural and personal consciousness, her memory helps explore her sense of self and heritage. Like landscape, she is as she connects herself. So at first, at the child, she is not happy with her belonging, her heritage. But as she grown up, she develops that type of connection with the land. Colonial influence. It critique of colonial narratives in Dominica's or Jamaica's environment challenges colonial and Eurocentric ideals, complexity of Creole consciousness. The landscape reflects that struggle with colonial identity, how people were struggle due to colonialism, how people were stuck with their life. We can also find here the clash of perspective. From the Antoinette's perspective, like she is from Caribbean landscape, like she is says that it is my identity, but Rochester sees it differently. He is not feel that belongingness from that place. So it arises tensions between them. In betweenness, like the place liminal spaces, like Caribbean serves as in between space, which embodies the cultural hybridity and reflects tensions between colonial identity. Like Antoinette's existence in this liminal space highlights that her struggles, like she is not neither with European or any black colonial words. Like Caribbean, we can see Caribbean as a liminal space. Critique of colonial binaries, like where we can also find that she is also belonging from that slave owner family. So we can find that it challenges artificial boundaries, like one side is a colonizer, one side is a colonized, black and white binaries. We can also find the mention of wild Eden imagery, Rochester fear and control. Like it represents that colonial exploitation, fearing Caribbean while dominating and symbolizing control over both land and people. Like they have this type of mentality to rule over people. Colonial control, rebellion, and subversion. Gender and space, as we see that Antoinette's confinement in Thornfield Hall symbolizes that the dual control exert by both colonialism and patriarchy. Like she is not able to take her life decisions also. Like she is depending on someone like who is not a part of her life before, but now he is a very important part of her life. So we can find the Thornfield Hall as we can. She is stuck there. She is not able to find out herself. Symbolism of fire, like we can find that fire at Colibri and Thornfield Hall represents act of rebellion, linking that Antoinette's personal struggle to broader colonial resistance. We can find that at one fire we can find that Antoinette's rebellion. At one fire we can find that people who is a colonized people, we can find their rebellion. Subversion of colonial narratives, Rees critic, Eurocentric, that we discussed earlier. Special identity, displacement, and psychological markers like Caribbean landscape. At first, as we see that she is, as a child, she is not feeling like people were calling her like white cockroach. So she is not that this is my people and this is, but so she is feel distanced by herself. The Sargasso Sea is a metaphor, as we see that she is struck by her own decisions. Psychological markers like external events like emancipation, racial tensions, and the burning of her house shape her personal journey. Like she is not able to trust anyone. Like her friend also betrayed her. So Tia. So she is not able to. Uh, trust anyone. Inside also, she is not able to have that love. So she is not able to develop that sense. Connection to the landscape, we can say that she is very connected with Caribbean landscape, but she is also from one side she is not very much connected with England. Rochester, when she is feeling that alienation from England, so on the other side, Rochester is feeling alienation with Caribbean landscape. That and it resistance through landscape. Landscape through elements like fire and her red dress. It represents that now she is struggling with her identity and autonomy. That and it impacts on her psychology also. Antoinette's alienation, we can find that both English colonizer and Afro-Caribbean community. We can also find that wife and husband, but we can also find it as the colonizer and colonized. Symbolic landscapes like Colibri Estate, the convent, and Thornfield also play crucial role. Natural imagery and symbol elements like fire and snakes also, and marginality and resistance. At Christophine, we can say that she is belonging from herself. Like she represents resistance by staying true to her culture, identity and rejection, assimilation, contrasting with Antoinette's struggle. We can find that the contrast of England and Caribbean culture, that colonial and post-colonial tension and geographic duality of Caribbean culture, of Jamaica and of England. Landscape reflects themes like we can find that Thornhold symbolize the confinement and alienation and trauma also. And we can find that Colibri as the childhood and early identity. Grain Boys as a reflect ties her to West Indian heritage, that it highlights tension between natural beauty and cultural alienation. England, as we say, that it's described as a cardboard world. When she is not able to, she is feel like exile and loss of identity. Landscape as a reflection of her the characters, and we can find colonial impact. Sargasso Sea is a showless. We can find that a Thornfield mirror identity, like absence of mirrors, key in location symbolize that denial of self-reflection and agency. Like all the characters were stuck due to some places. Thornfield, fire, and colonial power also. So in conclusion, we can say that Jean Rees, White Sargasso Sea shows how landscapes deeply affect identity and emotion. The vibrant Caribbean reflects Antoinette's struggles with belonging, her cultural roots, while the cold, oppressive English setting symbolizes her alienation through powerful symbols like the Sargasso Sea and fire. Rees critiques colonialism, patriarchy, and the identity conflicts. The novel highlights how place shapes who are we, and both the pain of displacement and strength found in resistance and self-discovery. These are my references, and thank you. If you have any question, feel free to ask.
So, my question is, how can Antoinette's struggle against patriarchal control be linked to modern feminist movement and the fight for gender equality?
Yes, Antoinette's struggle against patriarchal control, we can link it with feminist movements. Like at first, we can find that she is suffered from all the things, but at last, we can find that she finally took a stand for herself. Like everything is now enough, and we can find that she rebelled for herself. So we can find feminist movements like Me Too. Like we have many feminist movements. Like one women have that rights to be in a relationship, to be mother or not, and she has that right to we have that to abortion right. We have, if she want to abort her child or not. So we can find that Antoinette's struggle against patriarchal control. We can say that through this movement we can link it with modern world. Yes.
So, Pallavi, my question is, how does the destruction of nature in Sargasso Sea compares to how damage to the environment today affects people's culture and identity?
Yes, we can say the destruction of nature, as we find in White Sargasso Sea, that it compares how not only the environment but those people also who are connected with that environment. So it also, we can say that if we say that global warming or that remove of forest deconstruction, destruction, forest destruction, we can also find that through that, not also we, but the animals who were living in the forest, they were affected by it. So it also that we can say to remove that some species of people. So it reflects the culture and identity of people also, and it also affect on person. Yeah, thank you. That's it from my side.
Very good afternoon, everyone. On the fourth day of presentation, I am going to make a presentation on comparative analysis, Fanon and Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, on decolonization. My personal information and things which we are going to discuss in the presentation. And let's start with the research question. So the question is, how do Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence and Fanon's advocacy of revolutionary violence differ in their approaches to decolonization? And hypotheses lead the same thing, that how these both the theory of decolonization are different by each other, and how this works in history and how it can be in the future. So let's start with the introduction. The comparative philosophies of Mahatma Gandhi and Frantz Fanon on decolonization explore their approaches to resistance, Gandhi's non-violence, and Fanon's revolutionary violence. So here I have experimented something that I have text. I have hyperlinked the text so that important things which we can take by the clicking the link, because each and everything can't be right in the slide. So as we can read in the introduction, that how that both the theory of decolonization is different. That Gandhi was telling about that non-violence, and Fanon was totally against. His theory of revolution is against. It is like kind of a violence theory. The very first thing is colonial violence shared diagnosis. Gandhi and Fanon viewed colonialism as integrally violent.
Gandhi saw British imperialism as a symbolic of a systematic, coercive, and threatening India's cultural and moral foundation. That, as we know, that as we are Indian, we know the history of Indian independence. That how Mahatma Gandhi have worked hard to give independence to India, and it was the whole theory was like not the theory, but the whole process was like very not that much violent, or as he was believe in ahimsa and satyagraha kind of thing. And in totally contrast, the Fanon was believing in a violent and a revolutionary and rebellious kind of thing. Like in Algeria, whatever he doing, he have actually worked in Algerian independent movement, which was against the France colonial rule. And he have very prominently participate in this movement. And his many works like Wretched of the Earth, and his another work like white face black face white mask. This is also is related is based on his experiences. Now, what are the strategies of decolonization? Gandhi's strategy focus on non-violence like ahimsa and self-rule, and in contrast, the Fanon's theory was based on revolutionary violence, which articulate in, as I said, Wretched of the Earth. He argued that violence was necessary to dismantle the colonizer's power and rebuild the colonized psyche, drawing from his work with the Algerian National Liberation Front. This Algerian National Liberation Front is actually kind of, we can say, Sanstha, or a kind of organization which was leading the Algeria at that time. And Mahatma Gandhi was, there is a phrase, is a kind of a phrase which is said by him that koi ek gal par tamacho mare, so we have to in front of to apne bijo gal dhari devano. But against Fanon is against of him that if we will angri daiye to pocho le le, and in that sense. So we have to if we can't oppose the things, then colonizers will kind of eat us. So according to Fanon, that if we want to independent, that we have to rebel the things. Philosophies of self and other. So according to Gandhiji, that we have to suppress, or we have to harm himself instead of harm anyone other. So in that sense, we can say that Gandhiji was doing upas and fast kind of thing whenever he doing mistakes. So so his philosophy is like was not self-centric, but it is kind of still spiritual or moral, which is central the moral thing. And Fanon was saying that kind of a different thing, that the violence is a kind of a synonym of liberation. That if we want to liberation, then we have anyhow we have to follow the violence. Contrast and overlapping. Gandhi advocates moral resistance, and Fanon argued for forceful liberation. Both sought to overcome dehumanization. Gandhi villaged republic envision and the peaceful political future. While though they were their theory of decolonization is different, but ultimately the thing is that they both want to decolonize the villagers. And in this, yes, and decolonize the villagers, and in somehow, ultimately we can say that as their aim was same at the ultimately. So we can say that some things in their theories are same as well. Despite the differences, both thinkers' ideas stemmed for deep engagement with the effect of colonial violence. Psychological dimension of decolonization, as we know that how Fanon have argued in his Black Skin White Mask, the book, that how colonized people are affected from the from that whole the process of whatever the happening with us. We have a example of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, that how colonized people are totally disturbed from that whole process. And in other hand, Gandhi said that this satyagraha and this ahimsa, these kind of things can be psychologically relief, can give us relief. So these kind of things, psychological dimensions of the both theory of decolonization is kind of a very total different. the role of community in decolonization. So ultimately, they both want to decolonize the thing. So Gandhiji was actually connect the whole. If I'm go specific, then Gandhiji was actually connect all the villages of which are at that time in the unindependent India. And he said that if peoples will unite, then and there we will have a independence. And in other hand, slightly different, the Fanon said that we have kind of leader aspect, and that is why we have this FLN organization, which was leading the multiple groups of Algeria. Relevance today, this is kind of contemporary thing, that how this both the theories are not that much 100% not applicable today, and how can we can't cancel both the theories as well, because in some at some point we can apply both the theories, and in that sense. So let me conclude the presentation here, that these two distinct yet profoundly impactful approaches to decolonization, Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence sought to transformation colonial power structure through moral and spiritual resistance, inspire movement worldwide. And as we know that how his satyagraha and this thing is worldwide. And in other hand, Fanon's theory is actually revolutionary violence and emphasize liberation as a means to reclaim humanity and dignity from oppressive system. While their methods and ideologies differ from both, shared a vision of creating future free to us to critically engage with resistance, justice, and liberation in a global and historical context. So you can visit these sources for further reading, and thank you very much. We can discuss the questions now.
KUSUM, my question is, can you provide examples of decolonization struggles or conflict involving colonized or oppressed people?
There are a number of when we can take the example of India, where how Indians were oppressing from the British rule, and how they opposed them. And there are a number of examples in the Africa continent, because as we know that there are a number of black peoples who were colonized, who were colonized by the colonizers, and how they opposed the white people. And there are a number of maybe civil wars can be also at the American Civil War can be categorized in this oppressive people kind of thing. So this was the thing.
So my question to you is, Kusum, according to you, which theory of decolonization do you find most accurate, and which one do you disagree with?
Okay, this will be personal thing, that how this both the theories are firstly both the theories are important. And for example, if we have any problem with the department, so we can't directly go to the organization, go to the VC, and can't we complain them. So we can firstly we have to apply Gandhiji's theory, so that we can slightly shabdoti pate tya sudhi chalwa devan. But we can't directly rebel the things. So in my personal, so I can go with firstly Gandhiji's approach, and there are enathi kam no bane to Fanon is standing here. So thank you very much. This was from my side.
Don't be bent, go with flow. Just try to explain in brief. Okay, main concept is the surrender to the experience. Calm without present, but in distress.
Hello everyone, good evening. Today is the fourth day of the presentation, Post-Colonial Study. I am KHUSHI RATHOD. Friday is a subaltern character is my topic. This is my personal information. This is the research question and hypothesis. This is table of content which I discuss. I am not discuss Jem Coetzee and four because of the UNNATI and PRIYANSHIBA will present. Subaltern theory. Definition of subaltern. Subaltern refers to group of the people who are marginalized. Hegemonic power structure often lacking agency within the dominant social, political and cultural discourse. Antonio Gramsci was initially coined the term of describe the non-elite social groups. In the post-colonial study, others like Ranjit Guha and Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, who emphasize the subaltern lack of representation within the colonial, nationalist and elite historiographies. I am information in Gayatri Spivak article. Subaltern theory. Subaltern theory examines how a marginalized group from the system of power and the challenges narrative created dominant elite people and give visibility to the silence and ignored experience of this group. Key concept, epistemic violence, inaccessibility of the subaltern voice, critical intervention, subaltern study collective and Spivak critique. In the subaltern theory, three goals of subaltern theory. First, highlight the limitation of the dominant discourse represent marginalized community. Second, the ethics of power dynamic representation. Third, explore the alternative ways, understanding the narrative experience in subaltern. Friday's silence identity. Friday's muted ways. In the story to see, Friday's tongue is chopped. It represents the physical violence in the history of the colonizers. Friday's inability to speak parallel systemic silence. His silence symbolizes the native people's story remain untold in their history. And this information in Devraj and Sondarraj article. The role of language and communication. In the role of language and communication in the story, Crusoe responds to Friday limited vocabulary as many as he needs, and Susan to despite the teach of Friday and give the voice of inadvertent replace a colonial attitude. The tension between Susan desire to represent the Friday and failure bridges. Highlight the ethical complicity of the represent voicelessness. Same article. Friday is a subaltern. First point, colonial operation is subjection. Friday represents the historical operation of the subaltern groups, particularly those subject colonization. His silence reflects the systemic errors and the identities and histories of colonized individual and imperialistic regime. Coetzee criticized the Friday oppressive structure by emphasizing the Friday silence and the marginalized people rather than the helplessness. And this information in Sher Khani's article. Representation of the other. In the story, Fridays represent an other like Susan and Crusoe. Susan is a particular civilized and imposing language and frameworks, and Crusoe reduced it's a Friday as a liberal, lack of agency and autonomy. Friday's silence challenge the dominant care effort to define in the control identity, and Friday's silence portrayed as active rejection of the narrative. Same article, the symbolic of muteness in Friday. Many limit of representation in Friday. Friday challenge ability to dominate colonial narrative to fully represent in the Coetzee position to Friday's muteness, forcing the readers to confront the gap and the silence within the historical and the domination. Friday silence resists this tendency by remaining exclusive and refusing the conform to the Susan Barton or for interpretation. Silence as a resistance. His silence disrupt to colonial framework where the language is a tool dominance and highlight the limitation of the colonial discourse. Critique of the narrative around the Friday. Friday's in the two character, Susan Barton's role and Crusoe's role. Susan Barton's role to recover the Friday's was a narrative story. He tried to teach the words, but in last not to teach the word, and in the paper is the circle. The Susan acknowledged the impossibility of authenticity representing the Friday story. In the book, the sentence, the story of the Friday's tongue is a story unable to be told by me. While the Susan effort highlight the gaps of the colonial narratives, her action on complicating the epistemic violence, speaking the Fridays rather than the enabling him speak. In the sentence, what he is to the world is what I make of him. This information I give taken Nimne article. Crusoe's influence. Crusoe's exercise the control over the Friday. He refrained from the teaching Friday English in the Iceland. This sentence, this is the not England. We have no need to great stock of words. Control and labor. Crusoe forces Friday to engage in meaningless labor. Crusoe's speculation about the cause of Friday mutilations, his ultimate indifference to Friday's history of subaltern identities in colonial narrative, border of implication in post-colonial study, subaltern representation in literature. Friday is the critic of colonial narrative. In the Coetzee 4, Friday's silence functions as a powerful colonial narrative, marginalized subaltern voice. His muteness symbolizes the systemic of suppression and misrepresentation. Friday's voicelessness, Coetzee undergoes to limits of the colonial narrative. Role of the literature in addressing the perpetuating subalternity. The novel does not merely write back, but the canon, but challenging its very foundation. Coetzee highlights the role of authorship and narrative authority in the creation of the colonial text, like Friday for the ideological purpose. The role of the silence in post-colonial discourse. Friday's silence is not merely absence, but the deliberate absence. Challenge the reader to confront ethic and limitation of representation. The novel highlights silence is a form of agency. Refuse to speak, become act defiant against the colonial authority. This racial critical question about the ethical repression. Can the subaltern truly be represented with the framework designed the hegemonic power? In the story, Friday's silence underscore the dangers of appropriating subaltern experience for the narrative ideological ends. In last conclusion, in the Coetzee 4, Friday embodies the subaltern, his silence, symbolizing the systemic errors of the marginalized voices under a colonial rule. Through his voicelessness, Coetzee critique the limitation of the dominant narrative and the ethical dilemmas of the representation as seen in Susan Barton's failed attempt to articulate Friday's story. Friday's muteness resists colonial framework, highlighting the needs of self-representation and exposing the traditional literary and historical discourse in capturing the subaltern experience. This challenges reader to confront the gap and the silence inherent in the post-colonial narrative. This is my references, and thank you. If any question, you ask me.
My question is, can Friday's silence be considered a universal critique of all oppression system beyond the colonialism?
Yes, KUSUM. Friday's silence will be considered the universal critique of all oppression because it symbolizes the marginalized group, denied voice and the representation, colonizers, socialism, racism, all the under the silent and his role to His role to power structure to okay next.
So, Kushi, my question to you is, in your opinion, what lessons from Friday's portrayal can be applied to address the challenges of representing marginalized voice today?
Yes, Pallavi, my opinion, the Friday is the representation of the marginalized voices in today times to say that the marginalized people to say on a role in represent in today times interrupt and he is to want the today's society to not to say in on Europe and sorry their opinion and marginalized people to as the represent in society. Thank you.
Very good evening to everyone. So today our fourth day of our presentation on post-colonial studies, where I'm going to deal with the topic of the role of the unreliable narrator in the white Sargasso Sea. This is my personal information, and let's talk about research question and hypothesis. In my research question, how does Gene Rees utilize the unreliable narrative in the white Sargasso Sea to challenge the conventional notions of the truth and the reality? And what does this narrative technique really reveal about the psychological and cultural struggles of the protagonist Antoine? In hypothesis, the use of unreliable narrator in the white Sargasso Sea integral to the exploration of the identity, memory, and the colonial discourse, where the narrator's subjective perspective shapes the readers to understanding the truth, reality, and cultural conflict, and ultimately highlighting the complexity of the post-colonial identity. This is my table of content which I am going to discuss. I'm not going to in the novel, not going to deal with the novel about the introduction. So let's come to the main point. In a wide Sargasso, see how we find the unreliable narrator. There is some points which I am going to discuss, that we can find out that okay, the narrative structure and the how unreliable narrative is very connected in this novel. So the point is the novel alternate between the Antoine and the Rochester as the narrators, each representing their subjective experience. This shifting point of view to raise question about the reliability for their accounts. So in the White Sargasso Sea, the novel, the both characters are in some kind of way, we can see the how their narratives, how both characters are differentiations in the White Sargasso Sea. In the Rochester's narration is influenced by his culture's superiority as an Englishman and his inability to understand the Caribbean culture, leading to bias and the possibly inaccurate perception of the Antoine. In other point, like both narrators provide conflicting descriptions of events and characters, particularly in regarding to their marriage and the Antoine's behavior. Like we all know that in character of the Antoine, is from the childhood, he's some kind of he's struggling, or he the society is not accepting her because of his behavior. In silence and gaps, Antoine's voice is often silenced, and either by societal norms or Rochester's dominance in the narrative and leaving significant parts of her story unfold to ambiguous. Rochester, while controlling the narrative in parts, omits the critical detail about his emotions and action to further contribute his incomplete pictures. So we can find that how how Rochester's narrator is controlling Antoine's identity, that how he controls her. In the novel structure, marked by the fragment and non-linear storytelling, mirrors the character's unstable state of mind and emphasizing the unreliable nature of their narrations. In other point, in colonial and feminist theme, the unreliable narration reflect the broader themes of colonial and gender power dynamics, where voices are suppressed or distorted by the dominance culture and patriarchic system. If we connect this novel with colonial perspective, then we can find out, we can understand more that how its narrative, unreliable narrative is very reflective, and how thematic concern we can find out. In a voice of the unreliable narrator, we can find out the narrator filter events through the personal biases and emotions and limited understanding, creating a distorted narrative. Other in their accounts, like in character of Antoine and Rochester, they often include conflicting details or gaps that single their reliability. So in in a character of the Antoine, you can find out that she is not herself because of her past. She don't know where she is living, which present in her character we cannot find which he is living. He is living is reality or any dream
Russian means Sreshti. University or any type of that's it's quite manageable.
Okay, so continue with my presentation in voice of the unreliable narrator. The other point is culture, racial, gender, or personal bias are reflected in their narration, affecting their portrayal of events and characters. In manipulative intention, some of the narrative consequently deceive the audience and shaping their voice to obscure to the truth or serve their motives. So we can find out some of the narrators how manipulate other characters and because of their motives. This joint non-life narrative style reflect the narrative's chaotic inner world and lack of complex knowledge. In narrative gaps and silence, that key details are omitted or sidestepped, encouraging reader to question the narrator's account and uncover hidden truth. So, in the narrative structure, we can find out how we can ask the question about that how the narrative are in shape of the how why they silence or why they are like in a way that behave like that. Like we find out in character of the Antoine, and how they're hiding the truth about in the like a story like beginning of the story till the end. How we find how they are hiding the truth in such a way they are also they uh, they are trying to give truth, but still not there. Reader's role in interpretation. The unreliable narrator's voice requires readers to actively interpret the narrative and the piece together to clue for the fuller understanding. So how we can understand how reader will are going to understand perspective or the interpretation, how narrative structure are there, or how narrator voice and how it's required to reader to understand about that and how he can interpret or he or she can interpret. We can find out the Antoinette as an unreliable narrator. How we can find out in this character that Antoinette and experience which are often filtered through her unstable mental state and making her account subjective and unreliable. So we can find out the character of the Antoine, that his emotion experience that till begin with the childhood and till how after the marriage, how her experience is portrayed in the novel. How narrative structure are portrayed. Psychological instability. So her mental health deteriorates over the course of the novel, and the declines skew her perception of the reality and her ability to present the event accurately. We can find out in the novel that how his behavior, how his mental health, or how mentally he in a story or in the novel, we can find out how in each event, how her narration are portrayed, and how his presence is making the novel the like is in a novel. Her presence are making like he is as an unreliable narrator. Trauma and memory. So Antoine's childhood trauma that include the burning of television and her mother's mental breakdown affect her ability to distinguish between her past and present. As I said, because of past and present, he is because of past or present, he is not able to see herself and her presence, that where she is, like he is she is in past or present, or she in the real in a real life, or she is in some kind of dream, or other things. Fragment narrative styles. The use of the fragment narrative structure mirrors her practice speech. Her thoughts and memories are not linear, and creative ambiguity about the truth of the events. In the other fact, the relationship of her, in her relationship, especially with the Rochester, we can find out how Rochester is not understanding Antoinette, or he is not understanding the world of the Antoinette, how it's portrayed, or in this manner, we can the narrative structure is still some way is lacking to build the character to improvise in this novel. So in the confusion between the reality and delusion, as I said, she don't know where the presence of herself is. That sometime he become in reality talking to her husband, and then sometimes is a hallucination, or dreaming something, and it's because of that it's leaving the readers uncertain about what true and what versus the imaging. So we also not find out that why is she doing that, and what is the motive behind it. We also struck in the true or the imaging things, that okay, this is the true or this is the imaging, but we still not find in this novel or in this character symbolizing of renaming. So Rochester gives her name of Bertha, the symbolically erasing her identity. So basically, her identity already erasing, because of the how her past was her past was, and how his mentally condition is still in the story. We can find out, but Rochester gives her also name that I can call you is a Bertha. So this destabilize of her own further affecting the consistency and clarity of her narration. A critic of patriarchy and colonize. So how we can find his character as in this colonized perspective or event. So Antoine's unreal narration can be seen as a reflection of how patriarchy and colonized systems silence and distort the voice of marginalized individuals, and making their accounts seem untrustworthy. So as I mentioned earlier, society is not accepting her because of his some kind of society also empower her. So in some way that we will okay, understand that okay, this is the empower of that, then okay. But in other side we can see that Antoine, like in the character of the Antoine, how he's struggling through his childhood, but in the society or the colonial idea or a colonial world, she also rejected by them. So in conclusion, we can find out the White Sargasso powerful narrative device highlighting the complexity of the identity, power, and perception within the context of colonial and patriarchy by representing pregnant and conflicting accounts from Antoine and Rochester. Change is complex reader to question the objective of the truth and the way of dominant system disorder or silence the marginal voices. And Antoine's subjective perspective shaped trauma and psychological instability and cultural alienation, and contrast to sharply with the Rochester bias viewpoint and grounded in colonial and patriarchy superiority. Together, their unreliable narrations create the layer and ambiguous narrator, forcing readers to actively interpret and piece together the story, underscoring the themes of culture misunderstanding and identity erasures and the power dynamic inherent in the storytelling. So I will in my presentation with the uh, quote or the line of the White Sargasso that given by Jean Singh, that I have been too happy. I thought it cannot be last, but being so unhappy, it would kill me. So if I am to connect this quote, then I will connect with the Antoine, that how his narrative is structured with, maybe she is not unhappy or happy, but we cannot find that. Okay, he is in dream or in reality as well. So as I say, his character is not very understandable. So yeah, this is my reference, and thank you. If you have any question, you can ask.
So, Jay, my question is, how do the gender power dynamics in the novel influence the portrayal of Antoine experience and relationship with Rochester?
In the power dynamics, we can find out that the measure of the Antoine and the Rochester, they're both the in the narrative structure. We can find out that both characters some way is like one. Antoine is like being like, we can say we can slave, or how his experience, how her experience being told by, and how Rochester his her role relationship with Rochester also some kind of be a question about that, why in some way why he's not understanding her, and why why he's empowering her, or why in some way he's not understanding. So yeah, that's my question answer for it.
So my question is, in what way does the unreliable narration in White Sargasso reflect the broader themes of colonialism and culture misunderstanding?
In a White Sargasso, we can find out that unreliable narrator and the theme of the colonialism and the cultural misunderstanding is very reflective of the both narrators, Antoine and Rochester. That how both in some way, like we can find out that okay, Antonians is like some kind of silence woman, like the colony is like colony or society is being power, or Rochester also being in power of her, and in some way it's also brought up the theme of the cultural misunderstanding, that in some way Rochester not understanding Antoinette for some reason, that why we can understand it because of her mental issue, or because of her trauma, or because of her presence, that she also not define herself. Because of that, we can also find out this theme in this novel as well. So yeah, this is from my side. Thank you everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is my presentation topic is exploring the woman voice and identity in gene race white Sargasso Sea. This is my personal information, a table of content. So my presentation hypothesis is the fragmented identity and silence voice Antoinette in gene race white Sargasso Sea illustrate the struggle of Creole women to assert individuality and self-expression within the confines of patriarchal and colonial system, reliving a post-colonial feminist critique of race, gender, and power. There are many presented are introduction by Jean Race and White Sargasso Sea. No, I would like to make my presentation main point. Post-colonial feminist perspective. In White Sargasso Sea, there are three part of novel. In a first part, end-to-end face rejection from both white and European and the black community. Male control. Antoinette struggle with Rochester dominate Antoinette erasing her identity and agency. Woman voice. The novel highlight the woman's resistance and mutual support, oppression and madness. In the last part, we can see Antoinette mental health and suffer due to control and displacement. Colonial critique. Women's struggle are shaped by both gender and colonial oppression. The woman voice from White Sargasso Sea. Antoinette is a marginalized voice. We can see in the novel fragmented story show her broken identity and Rochester patriarchy and also in childhood in Jamaica colonialism. Narrative structure. In this novel, there are many perspective in the novel. Antoinette, Rochester, and is a third person. Highlight the male dominance over female voice. Antoinette symbolize of silence. Silence show oppression and lost identity. Rename Bertha to erase individuality. Antoinette fragmented identity. In this novel, three part of novel, there are a shifting narrative. First, Antoinette childhood in Jamaica. Antoinette feel disconnected from both black Jamaicans and white colonizers. In second part, in this novel, in Rochester and husband Sue, his narrative criticizes reshape Antoinette's identity. In the last part, we can see the mental decline, Antoinette identity fracture leading to her breakdown. Dreams reveal her suppressor fears and desire. The Creole woman struggle for self-expression. Identity crisis. Antoinette feels caught between two worlds, rejected by both European and a local black community. She questions who I am, where do I belong. Language problem. Antoinette Creole English is criticized by Rochester, who calls it horrible. This shows how Creole women speech look down upon, silencing them. Relationship and understanding. With Rochester, he does not try to understand to her culture. With Christopher, she represents Antoinette's Caribbean identity and offer a way to stay connected to her roots. With Tia, shows the tension between Creoles and the black community. Jean's race narrative techniques. In this novel, we can see use of stream of consciousness, shifting perspective and non-linear narrative. We can find in this novel double voice discourse. Character like Antoinette and Christopher express a dual identity and shaped by personal voice and external culture pressure drawing on Bakhtin concept. themes of madness and isolation. We can see in the third part, in the novel, third part of novel, madness. Antoinette madness is caused by traumatic event like her mother's lose in childhood. Rochester wants her mental state and controlling her, isolating her, taking away from identity. The oppressive and colonial and patriarchal society add to her struggle. Isolation. Antoinette feels isolated because she doesn't fully belong to either the white or black communities in Jamaica. Her marriage to Rochester makes her more lonely as he distances himself emotionally. Society's stigma around her mental health and identity increase her isolation. Symbolism and landscape role. Natural landscape. The Jamaican landscape reflect the Antoinette's feeling of confusion and instability. For instance, the wild and untamed environment symbolize her own mental chaos and feeling her entrapment. Symbolism of garden go wild. The garden gone wild near her home symbolize Antoinette's deep sense of alienation and loneliness. In conclusion, White Sargasso Sea is Jean Rey's stand is a transformative work that reclaims the narrative of marginalized women, confronting themes of identity and voicelessness through a deeply feminist lens by reimagining Jane Eyre's Mad Woman in the Attic. The novel innovates upon canonical literature, offering the fresh perspectives that challenge colonial and patriarchal concepts through its layer social commentary. White Sargasso Sea critically examines and lasting impact of colonialism and patriarchy on the woman's lives, making it a work of enduring significance and that continues the spark vital conversation of gender, race, and identity. This is my references. Thank you. Now open for question. So, Jai, my question is, what is the effect of using multiple narrators in the novel? So, in White Sargasso Sea, we are see in as Antoinette viewpoint is a struggle and loses her, lacking her identity. In Rochester viewpoint, we can see is a misunderstanding and is a calling like a Bertha and patriarchy. We can see in the multiple narrator in White Sargasso Sea.
So my question: in what ways does the novel emphasize the struggles of Creole women for self-expression?
As Antoinette group, Creole woman for self-expression like is the loses identity and her voice also, home and also in relationship. There are a struggle for as a Creole woman we can see in White Sargasso Sea. Thank you.
Hello everyone, myself Jatin Varu. Today I am going to present a presentation on post-colonial narrative in Indian cinema. Hypothesis of my presentation: Indian cinema, especially after independence, has been important in showing and shaping post-colonial identity. Movies like Lagan and Rang De Basanti provide a deeper understanding of the effect of British colonial rule and complicated nature of post-colonial identity in modern India. Research question of this presentation is, in what ways do films like Lagan and Rang De Basanti address the logical of British colonialism both in their plot lines and characters development? Table of content. First, we get the introduction of post-colonial study. Post-colonial study focus on the cultural, political and social effect of colonialism in regions like Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean islands. The main focus of post-colonial study is revive the culture of colonized country like Asia, America, Latin America, and especially in Caribbean island. It spread English thought. Colonialism led critics to examine how the language was used in maintain a colonial power. The key figures of this term is Edward Said, known for his work on Orientalism. In his work, we find the Edward Said portrayed the Western character as a superior and the Asian character and the African character as the inferior. Franz Fanon especially is known by his work like White Skin, Black Mask, and Wretched of the Earth, in which we find he portrayed the character to provide his character to go through the violence. He used violence against the violence, and violence is a tool to fight against British and colonized power. Homike Baba, especially known by his theory of hybridity and modernity, it's mark the lines like a colonialism affect both colonized person and colonizer also. Gayatri Spivak, especially known by subaltern theory and marginalized people's voice. The influence of British colonial in rule, how films comes in India. The films comes in India by Lumiere brothers in 1896. The screening of European films in India. Film culture begins. Theaters adapt the Indian customs, including special seating for women, creating unique movies, watching the culture. Western influence with Indian twist. D.G. Phalke made Raja Rammohan Raja Harishchandra in 1931. He is considered as the father of Indian cinema. British censorship. Britishers introduced the censorship board in 1981 to filter the movies based on the open for all and only for adults. Now in India, it's compulsory to anyone to have, if he release his movie, he compulsory to get a censorship board certificate for his movie. Rise of Indian study and sound films. Indian cinema grew with the introduction of studio and sound films featuring local language and music, reducing Hollywood's influence. Indian cinema post-independence. Themes like social economic issue, political and social realism, women's right and empowerment, anti-establishment and critique of atrocity. This theme mostly used in the post-independence movies before the independence, like films like Bhavan Shom, based on the themes like unemployment and struggles from working class. Films like Nishant and Manthan provides themes of communal problems and rural hardship. Films like Bhumika and Ghanshankar Radha, based on women's struggles in society and based on women empowerment also. Films like Sholay, based on the traditional practice often with critical perspective. Films like Satyajit Ray, it's based on focusing on realism and social conventions. And the village and rural life, based this film like Kodiyantr, based on portrait the traditional lifestyle and social issues by the rural life peoples. Case study on Lagan. Introduction, the movie of Lagan was released in 2001. The main protagonist of this movie is Bhuvan, played by Amir Khan. Films highlight the themes like unity and hope. The films awarded by the nomination of best for foreign language film in Oscar. Now we apply subaltern theory in the Lagan movie, giving a voice of the villagers. Movie we find when we took back on our history, we normally realize the people like farmers and untouchable guys and people who belong from lower caste. Mostly they were ignored in our history, but this film challenged this idea, and we find in the movie the characters like Bhuvan and Kachara both comes in a lower caste family, and they lead his team towards Britishers in cricket match. Fighting colonial power, villagers use cricket as a tool to fight against Britisher and colonizer and stand up themselves against him. Unity despite difference. When we find in a movie the different caste people came as a team, but in a team we find that there is not a permanent unity. We find a temporary unity. Despite they work as a team, but we find them some misunderstanding and some untouchability in that. Especially the character like Kachra constantly suffer from this type of untouchability problems. Role of woman, character like Gori and Elizabeth mostly work as a, no doubt they play important role in a movie, but mostly they work as a behind of the scenes. This time we find how women treat on that time. Mostly they are marginalized and they are under character. They played as under character and they judge as a under characters. The temporary unity, as we discussed, we find there is no any permanent unity. They all are struggle from different problems like untouchability, and people come from lower caste people like that. The second movie is Rang De Basanti. The Rang De Basanti movie is released in 2006. Plot mostly follows a group of university students who, after being a cast of documentary about the Indian freedom fighter like Bhagat Singh. A main character protagonist is a DJ played by Amir Khan. He is influenced by Bhagat Singh and his team. He explores the themes like impact of history on present and youth activism. Film awarded by the best film at the Film Prime Award. Patriotism and violence in Rang De Basanti. Patriotism redefined, and Rang De Basanti show the patriotism as an active fight against the injustice. As you all know, the protagonist of this movie, DJ, highly influenced by Bhagat Singh and his group. He used violence against the injustice and corruption of modern time, designed through violence. As we know, the theory of Fanon, he mostly believe in use violence against the violence. Similarly, we find in this movie Bhagat Singh, DJ, who choose the path of violence rather than despite path of non-violence. Rewriting national history, we find in history the theory of non-violence by Gandhi is mostly highlighted by in our Indian history, but the films challenge this idea and they try to change the concept towards non-violence to the violence. The violence and sacrifice for nation building. We know non-violence is played a major role in Indian independence, but we can't underestimate the power of violence like Bhagat Singh, Subhash Chandra Bose, and they all are played a important role to build our nation, like Sardar Patel also. So this film challenged this idea and try to uncover the power of violence of Indian independence. Conclusion: Indian cinema has helped shape post-colonial identity, especially after independence. Movies like Lagan, Rang De Basanti show the impact of British ruler and highlight the Indians' journey towards freedom and unity. This film challenges the colonial idea and focus on themes of national pride and change. In short, Indian cinema continue to explore what it means to free and how Indian moves towards from its colonial past. References of my work. Thank you. Now, if you have any question regarding my presentation, so you can ask.
So, Jatin, my question is, could you suggest additional movies apart from Rang De Basanti and Lagan that can effectively be analyzed using post-colonial theory?
I mentioned Lagan and Rang De Basanti in my presentation, and I tried to cover how they touch the area of post-colonial studies. And apart from these two movies, we take example of Mother India and Gandhi. They both are touch a similar kind of area of these post-colonial studies.
So Jatin, my question is, in your presentation, you discussed Fanon and his perspective on you mentality toward colonization. Could you have identify another thinker or figure with a contrasting perspective on colonizers?
As we discussed, Frans Fanon have idea of towards decolonization is use violence against the violence. But when we discuss about the contradictory person of this idea, so we find a very familiar example of in our India is he was a Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. He chose a non-violence path towards freedoms and independence. So we find Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi and Frans Fanon both are totally different. Both have totally different ideology, but they both are same for independence. So this is the end from my side. Thank you.
Hello everyone, myself Hemali Parmar. Today I am going to give presentation on Psychology of Liberation, Frans Fanon's vision in the wretched of the earth. Here is my personal information. My research question is, how does Frans Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth explore the psychological and societal impacts of colonialism and advocate violence as a means of achieving decolonization and liberation? And my hypothesis is, Frans Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth posits that colonial oppression causes deep psychological and societal harm, and that revolutionary violence is a necessary and transformative tool for reclaiming identity, restoring humanity, and achieving liberation. Introduction. The Wretched of the Earth is the most famous work which is written by Frans Fanon and was published in 1961. The book discusses the struggles of colonized people, the effects of colonialism on their mind, and the role of violence in achieving freedom. In this book, Frans Fanon tries to discuss about how colonized people were struggled to gain freedom, and also tries to show the effect of colonialism on their at that time people's mind and society. The book was written as a call to action. It uses passionate and inspiring language rather than academic analysis. Fanon get this idea from his own life's experience as a black man from Martinique and his critique of earlier movements like negritude. This book is still important because this is talk about decolonization and liberation, contemporary relevance and vision. The book is called as the handbook for the Black Revolution because it deeply talk about colonization, decolonization, and independence movement over worldwide. Fanon presents a broad perspective on international relations and cultural liberation, making it relevant beyond its time. Frans Fanon tells Africans and the diaspora to take leadership in building a fairer and more human world. Fanon was psychiatrist, so that he knows that how at the time peoples were at the time colonized people's mental health was, and he also tries to show that how people were feel unimportant at that time. In this book, there are 4 connected essays that are still relevant to liberation movements and global justice. Psychological and societal critique. Psychological damage of colonialism. Frans Fanon tells that colonization destroys the self-worth of the colonized people. For example, being a child, they are told every day that he is not good enough.
for after some time he will also believe that he is not good enough. That is how colonialism work with the nation. Violence as a tool for liberation. Fanon sees violence as essential for decolonization. Fanon was thinking that violence is the necessary for necessary to fight against colonized people. Sorry, colonized power. Critique of class analysis in African societies. Fanon critiques simplistic views on class struggle, emphasizes the complexity of African social structures beyond just class divisions. Criticism of colonial psychiatry. Fanon attacks colonial psychiatry for ignoring the role of colonization in mental health. It focuses on treating individual rather than the root cause of colonial trauma. Rejection of Western theories on colonized people. Fanon was criticized Western ideas because he was thinking that this theory was failed to understand the colonized experience. Violence and freedom in the wretched of the earth. Violence as liberation. Fanon views violence as a necessary response to colonial violence, essential for gaining freedom. Fanon gave two kinds of violence. First one is instrumental violence, which aimed at achieving a goal like ending colonization and gaining freedom. And second one is intrinsic violence, is about regaining humanity and dignity. Revolutionary violence for identity. Violence is a way for oppressed people to reclaim their lost identity and self-worth. Influence of Sartre on freedom. Frantz Fanon got influence from Jean-Paul Sartre's idea. Sartre was believed that freedom is about breaking limits. Violence as reclaiming humanity. For Fanon, violence is not just destruction, but a way to restore the humanity of the oppressed. Conclusion. Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth, powerfully critiques colonialism, exposing its psychological and societal impacts while advocating for decolonization through revolutionary violence. He emphasizes violence as a means to reclaim identity and restore humanity, linking freedom to mental liberation. Fanon's visionary ideas, rooted in his personal experiences and psychiatric insights, continue to inspire global struggles for justice and equality. Here are works cited. Thank you. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask.
Can you give an example of how Fanon's idea influenced liberation movement?
Many groups were inspired by Fanon's idea, like for example, in Algeria, many people used his idea to fight against French rule, and one leader named Nelson Mandela, he was also inspired from Fanon's idea, and the group of Black Panther Party was also inspired from Fanon's idea.
So, Emily, my question is, do you think Fanon's idea of controversial?
Yes, Fanon's ideas are controversial because he said that violence is necessary for freedom, which some people don't agree with it, and he also criticized the Western theory, which also some people can be upset from him also. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Divya Jadhav. In the fourth day of our presentation, I am going to deal with the post-colonial study from historical roots to global future. These are the points which I discussed today. This is my personal information. The research question arises that what are the implications of post-colonial theory for understanding and addressing global inequality and injustice? The hypothesis deals that despite the formal end of colonial empires, the historical and cultural impact of colonialism persists, influencing contemporary global inequalities and political system and cultural representation in contemporary time. The introduction, while we discuss about post-colonial study, first we know about that what is post-colonialism. Post-colonialism is widely referred to the representation of race, ethnicity, and culture and human identity in more modern era, mostly after the many colonized countries got their independence. Now, as a field, what is post-colonial studies? The critical analysis of history, culture, literature, and modes of discourse that are specific to the former colonies from England, Spain, and France, and the other imperial countries of Europe. These studies have focused especially on the third world countries or the inferior country, or also says as the developing country. Post-colonial study is the interdisciplinary field that examines the culture, political, and economic consequences of colonialism and imperialism, how the imperial country or colonized country through their power reflect the idea of post-colonial study. The main aim that reflect in post-colonial study, it focuses on the impact of human exploitation during that time of the post-colonial era of exploitation of colonized people and their lands. Now the historical roots of post-colonial study. Definition: post-colonial study examines the impact of post-colonialism and imperialism on the culture, society, and literature. It emerged in the mid-20th century during the decolonized movement. The main purpose which reflect that dismantle or the legacy of colonial power structure and the period of colonial period. There were power in European society and also dominated in Asia, Africa, and the America, and how it's suppressed and labeled the inferior country. Decolonization movement, mid 20th century, which reflect the struggle for independence and independence of India, Africa, and the third world countries. Key figures and concept, as Jatin mentioned already in his presentation. That's why not I discuss. Now the post-colonial criticism and role of post-colonial critics. As we discuss about post-colonial studies, there is important part is post-colonial criticism and their roles. The post-colonial criticism emerged as a field in 1990s, gaining prominence through the influence of work like Spivak in her work, other words, Ashcraft, the Empire Writes Back, and Homi Bhabha's The Nation and Narration, and Edward said culture and imperialism. It was not recognized in earlier theoretical texts, and rather than the work of Nathaniel Hawthorne and Selden. Now the role of post-colonial critics, they were decoding the colonial ideology in his or her text and practice, and highlighting the agency of colonized culture and their work or literature, and advocating for the marginalized voice and history of literature. The best example we find that subaltern theory or Spivak idea of subaltern, and addressing the contemporary global inequalities, which relevance today also. While we discuss about the post-colonial idea, and in the global time or contemporary time, we have directly reflect this idea, and we already understand that how this post-colonial idea we find in our society nowadays also. Now the main point of my presentation, that how global implication of post-colonial studies. The first one is that challenging dominant narratives. The post-colonial studies aims to disrupt dominant narratives and challenge to claim a
sovereignty. The main idea of that dominant narratives which reflect, we know that the idea of colonize and colonizer, that's why we says that the dominant narratives is puts the idea of the post-colonial study in literature and highlighting the global interaction. It is also a main part that reflect the post-colonial study and highlighting the complexity of that day or the movement where occurs. Various kind of movements happen during that time, offering native response. Post-colonial study offer native response and the idea of the native liver or the people. They were resistant to the past and current colonial imperatives, borrowing Western knowledge. Post-colonial study borrow Western knowledge and blend its own use. The Western knowledge, of course, it says that through the impact of imperialism, there were times they were not able to find the idea of that how they depict the Western knowledge, because there is resistance of other countries, the developed country, and as a developed country, they were after the post-colonial time, they were able to get the idea of Western knowledge in literature. Distrusting culture or racial purity. Post-colonial study distrust all postures of culture or racial purity. Now the future of post-colonial study. If a nation is decolonized, that doesn't always mean the nation is liberated. If we say that in nowadays contemporary society, women or human also, they are free from all boundaries around them. And if we think about deeply, that we find that how very free. About if we think about personal, there are various kind of boundaries we find in our life. As a Chantal Jebus, American English professor in Paris, she was says that, and he was a women activist in Paris, and she was noticed that most of nation and the world's language have had their history shaped by colonialism, and therefore looking at the effect of colonialism is post-colonial text written not only in English but other words. Language is word where the notion of language one nation no longer obtains is a urgent task, as Chantal Jebus have noticed in the post-colonial literature. Then Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak says that I think the post-colonial is the day before the yesterday. Now the post-colonial study, why we study the post-colonialism, it's reflect and understand the impact of colonialism, as I already mentioned, that it reflect the idea of colonialism and third world country, challenge the assumption. Post-colonialism challenge the assumption formed by colonized and offer the native response and resistant to the colonial imperatives. Then understand the complexity of contact zone. It also help you to understand the complicated nature of contact zone, where the intercalation and cultural synthesis can occur. Evaluate the shifting meaning of home. A post-colonial study can help you to understand how the meaning of home shift from the people who cross the border or boundaries or who remain in their home to witness significant transformation. Then revigorate debates on world and global literature. Post-colonial study can help you to revigorate debates on world and global literature to neocolonialism, reflect through the neocolonialism, neoliberalism, and decoloniality. Now the conclusion, the post-colonial study remains vital in understanding history and shaping a just, interconnected world. Rooted in resistance to colonial legacy, it amplifies marginalized voice, explore the identity, power, and hybridity through the critical theories. Edward Said, Spivak, and Dipesh Chakrabarti, they all are the leading figures who reflect this kind of ideas and challenge the Eurocentric narratives and neocolonial practice, engage with globalization and environmental crisis, which was happen in the contemporary society also, and digital culture. Offers tool to critique the global inequalities and invention in inevitable futures. This is my references. And now, anyone have question regarding to ask me?
Divya, how does post-colonial theory challenge traditional Eurocentric perspectives and offer alternative ways of understanding global history, culture, and power dynamics?
Okay, Mali. The post-colonial theory challenge the traditional Eurocentric perspective, like to engage with, to gain the knowledge of Western and to know about the perspective of Western theories, know the dominant narratives, and know the culture which was globalized from people and colonized or colonial countries. Now, anyone have a question?
What are the enduring effects of colonial governance system of post-colonial states?
Okay, the enduring effect of colonial governance system on post-colonial state, there is a reflection of economic political system. These are the elements or reflection which was in connected with, we connected with this idea of post-colonial state. Okay, thank you.
Hello everyone, myself Asha Rathod. I'm going to present the topic future of post-colonial study or the environmental study. These are my personal information. Start with a research question that how will post-colonial colonial theory and practice evolve in the 21st century, and what are the key challenges and opportunities faced in addressing contemporary global issues. These are my hypotheses. What is the post-colonialism already mentioned in previous presentation? The critical analysis of history, culture, literature, and modes of discourse, and also third world country. So, post-colonial critics and writers. In Anya Lumba's book in Orientalism, Edward Said analyzed the fiction of various writers, exploring how they shape and where influence the societal tendency of European racial superiority. He is a pioneer of the branch of post-colonial criticism called colonial discourse analysis. And also, Homiko Bhabha has developed a number of the field neologism and key concepts such as hybridity, third space, mimicry, difference, and ambivalence. And Western colonial works like Shakespeare's Tempest, Charles Bronte's Jane Eyre, and Jane Austen's Mansfield Park, Rudyard Kipling's Scheme, and Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness has been targeted of colonial discourse analysis. So, why should we be concerned about the future of post-colonialism? Already Divya mentioned in that PPT that if a nation is decolonized, that doesn't always mean a nation is liberated. And Gayatri Spivak claimed that no longer have a post-colonial perspective. I think post-colonial is the day before yesterday. So, and Dipesh Chakravarti find that all his reading in theory of globalization, Marxist analysis of capital, subaltern studies, and post-colonial criticisms over the last 25 years have not prepared him for the task of analyzing and the planetary crisis of climate change. post-colonial eco-criticism. So, post-colonial eco-criticism is not a new field in post-colonial study, but many believe that post-colonial studies doesn't involve in environment study, and not that field. But eco-criticism is a branch of literary and cultural study that look at representation of the more than human world. Key figure of colonialism and capitalism, feminist, environmentalist, and the complex nature of nature. In that, Raymond William highlights the complexity of a concept of nature. He said that nature is one of the most complex ideas in our vocabulary. Early eco-critics often romanticize pristine wilderness, treating nature as an other, and contemporary eco-critics recognize the intersectionality of power relation, including gender, race, class, and species in the dominant of nature. Environmental activism in global south, and case study in of here I put one example, Narmada Bachao Andolan. The movement of against the larger dams and Narmada river in India, it challenging powerful economic and political interest, and Supreme Court last decision to allow the dam project. And other example of smart cities. Smart cities are the future, but which is allowing not just the economic but also for the post-colonialists, since they are being driven by first world country, especially multinational corporation and business tycoons like Elon Musk and Bill Gates. Bill Gates Smart City. This is a futuristic city which will be named Belmont. It will rely completely on smart technology such as high-speed digital network, data center, high-speed public Wi-Fi, and high-tech manufacturing facility and autonomous vehicles. So, conclude that a post-colonial study does not only study of colonialism, but its impact, but it also study of globalization, eco-criticism, Marxism, feminism, and queer studies. So here are my research questions. Sorry. Resources. Thank you. Now you can ask questions.
How does postcolonial theory connect to environmental issues?
Postcolonial theory it shows how he damaged environmental issue. Like example of here we take Narmada Bachao Andolan. In that larger dam reflect people of how if display place and damage environment and nature, and also
my question is that how can post-colonial theory address 21st century challenges?
Post-colonial theory, it can be helped to understanding the how past affected the present. That some country are rich and other are poor, and some culture are dominant and other are marginalized. So by understanding the history, we can move forward of equitable future. Thank you.
Okay, am I audible? Oh, not here on the live. Here, of course, you can hear me. It's very obvious in this case. It repeats also. Thank you. So, first of all, today we found quite good rate of improvement than yesterday. But then again, there were new disappointments tangled with the new situation. So, Unnati, well presented. There are no issues so far in the PPT or in your ways of explanation, but I think you were a bit too conscious, because of which some justifications were not properly done. But apart from that, I think your presentation was good. Rahul, well presented. PowerPoint presentation was also well organized, so that's good. And there are no errors in terms of citations also, so very well done. Priyanshi, two major pronunciation errors. Four, it's FOE, it's four. OA, it's Susan. A lot of you are pronouncing the name Susan very, very, very wrong. It's Susan, yeah. Then there is the issue of still reading the slides. Today I observed that you made an effort to make some eye contact. You tried explaining things in your own words, which is a good improvement, good development in this case. But still, a little bit more effort, and I think you are capable of, completely confidently explaining your things. So I think a little bit of more effort can improve things much more. Another issue which happened not just with you but with a lot of people was just because we had a timer here, a lot of people were conscious of the time and they were skipping the slides, skipping the points, missing out information, so on and so forth. But well, this is where you learn, right, to manage your things on time. So I guess that is one. Pallavi, well presented, well prepared PPT, good choice of topic, and well justified. However, I would suggest working on the length of the presentation. I understand the fact that there are certain topics which require elaboration and are naturally very lengthy. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind that we are all time bound at the end of the day, right? So I hope that you can work on those things. Kusum, well done. You have good presentation and explanation skills. You are confident in your approach and opinions, which is good. But there is a citation error in your presentation, which I'd like to point out. Where are you? Yes. So you mentioned one Fanon's work, The Wretched of the Earth, right? And you didn't cite him. So you have the sources apart from Fanon cited. Remember yesterday I told you that even if you mention them, even if you're, of course, your topic wasn't specifically on Fanon. That's what I understand. But At the same time, you are mentioning a very significant work of that particular person, so his name should be in the references. And not just that, it's not just a mention, you've also used some of his views to compare with Gandhi, right? So in that case, both those things should be cited. That's what my opinion is on this thing. Otherwise, things are very well cited. Yeah, so organizing, yeah. This references slide, you can just bigger the font a little bit and justifying things, managing it, the content a bit properly. So I think you need a little bit of editing. That is what I believe. So apart from that, there are no issues with the presentation, so it's good. Then we move to KHUSHI. What is the spelling of KHUSHI? Yes. But make sure those misunderstandings don't are not reflected in your PPT. That's all I wish to say and answer to that. You made, of course, the same mistake of skipping a lot of information because you were conscious of the time, right? Then we move to joint solemnity and the main text citation is missing. So you were trying to discuss the unreliable narrator in White Sargasso Sea. And you don't have a single mention of Jean Rees. You have cited the perhaps the summary or rather discussion from the Britannica source, which is good enough, but the original text should be cited. So that is one thing. I also noted good improvement in terms of explaining things, some non-verbal gestures, which was also good, better than yours. So that is what I appreciate. Apart from the citation error, there are no issues with the presentation, so it's good. Then we move to dry maronia. Same mistake, main text citation missing. So yours also was White Sargasso Sea. You cited Britannica and the biography of Jean Rees. You also mentioned the summary of White Sargasso Sea, but the text itself, the novel itself, is missing. And you also were good in terms of the improvement of explanation skills a little bit more. Although you were mostly reading, I did notice a little bit of eye contact with the viewers, but still a lot of work is required in that section as well. Apart from the citation error, there are no other issues with the presentation, so good one. Jatin, good choice of topic, but today you lost marks because of a major citation issue. What is it? So first things first, you mentioned the subaltern here, right? In reference to Lagan here, who proposed the subaltern theory and the major significant figures who are associated with subaltern theory. Whenever you use a particular theory, and this is not just about this paper, but any paper in general, whenever you mention a significant critical theory, and you are referring to some of the major views of that theory, then that theory the founder of that theory should be there in the presentation. You see, so that is one issue. The other thing is you also mentioned Said, you mentioned Bhabha, you mentioned Spivak. So those were there as names in your presentation, but they were not there as citations in your presentation. So whenever you refer to these people, you also are mentioning how they have contributed. If you check your list, you have mentioned that Edward Said is known for his work in Orientalism. You are also mentioning that Fanon is contributing in such a way, but you don't mention their works, or even they themselves are not cited there. So that is something you need to work on. Apart from that, the presentation was really good. You are already good with explanation and non-verbal gestures, so that's good. Himali, quite good improvement. Today you explained things in your own words, so that is good. Happy with that. Still reading a little bit. I think you will work on it, I'm sure. But main text citation is missing. So your entire PPT was based on the wretched of the earth, and poor Fanon lost a place in the work cited. See? Sorry? Yes, you forgot. He must be sad, I'm sure. So this is something which you need to work on. Apart from that, presentation was good, and I also noticed that you answered the questions well, with the best of your understanding. So that is really good. So that's it from my side. Those are the feedback which I wish to share with you. And now handing over to Megha ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Let's begin with the first presenter, TRUPTI. Your presentation was prepared well and explained well. Okay, good topic. Not a single suggestion from my side. Okay, RIYA, well did. Uh, you presented on globalization and fiction. Okay, and also content was good. Rahul will explain. Priyanshi, as Professor Madam mentioned, that you have to work on pronunciation, fo, not foe, and just find it out. Good thing that you just try to improve your eye contact and also try to give answer in a better way. Okay, so that is the good improvement. Pallavi, good presentation and performed well. Okay, good information in the connection that you have selected. Kusum, fantastic explanation, well did. But one mistake that you have to remember the reference which you have used, some other text, not a black face, but the black skin and white mask, no problem. In flow, maybe we can make mistakes, no problem, but just try to remember next time. KUSHI, good, but try to improve your speaking skill. Okay, with the help of practice. Okay, you can do practice with your friends before the presentation. So just try to give 2 to 3 hours for the speaking practice. Okay, before the presentation. Then Jay Solanki need to work on this font justification. Okay, otherwise the presentation was good and the good improvements. Okay, we can find it out. Jay Marunia, as the madam mentioned. Okay, just try to explain more rather than read the slides only. Okay, and just work on the pronunciation. Jatin, excellent. Very good topic you have selected. Okay, post-colonial study in Indian cinema, and you have referred to movie Lagan as well as Grande Basanti. Okay, well explained, but just try to focus more on the references as Madam suggested, as well as also you have done the same mistake in the pronunciation of the name, black skin, white mask. Okay, just try to be very conscious when you just try to speak some particular text. Okay, Hemali, as Madam mentioned earlier, a good improvement. Okay, quite well described to explain yourself. Okay, today, and also ended your presentation on time within 6 minutes. So that's good. Divya, your topic was good and explained well. Okay, and Asa. Okay, very good. Your performance okay today, and one thing that you have to explain your topics. Okay, today just try to read more rather than explaining. Okay, so just try to improve your explanation skill, otherwise your presentation content was good. Okay, but at last that one examples that this Narmada Andolan and all these things we cannot properly understand. Okay, so that after the example, you have to explain something more. Okay, so easily audience can understand what you want to convey with the help of that example. Okay, otherwise the presentation was good. So in a way, good presentation and your we can say this explanation, all of you, and all the best. Okay, for tomorrow's presentation, now I'll hand over to Prakriti ma'am for further remarks. So, in case of Divya's presentation, don't worry, it's not something scary there. Just an error with the citation again. So, in the references, if you see, you have a reference to M.H. Abraham's entry on postcolonial studies. How have you cited it? Just check your paper. But even if you don't find the book, you have referred to it, right? You have used it in your presentation. Even if you if you don't want to cite it, just use it out completely instead of making a mistake in citation. That is what I'm saying. It is better to forget, right? So you have written it down as a point in the references, but it is not following the MLA style, which is supposed to be done. You have added it as an in-text citation also when I think it was the case of defining postcolonialism. Yes, here. What is postcolonial studies? And you have it here, source M.H. Abrams' glossary of literary terms. You see the problem there, other sources are very well cited. So the one source by Iveson is properly cited. The one source by this Korobain, maybe I'm low, that pronunciation itself is tough. But even Spivak is very well cited. Tamarana is properly cited, but you don't have the citation of M.H. Abrams. So that is one thing I wish to point out. Then the other thing was this quote by Professor Chantal Zabou. Now that again, if it is a quote from somebody, you should mention the source from which that particular quote is taken, right? And I think it was Asha who did mention it in her presentation. She has also referred to the same source, if I'm not wrong. Yes. So from your PPT, it was missing. And you have an entire quote from her. So all I'm saying is whenever you have a particular content, a particular point, and a significant person on whom you are relying for your own perspectives and understanding, you should have their name in your PPT, right? So yes, that's it. Asha, with you, I think as Megha ma'am has just suggested, you need to work on the relevance of the examples that you add. Some justification regarding how are those examples relevant to your hypothesis and research questions. Right? So I think that would be it from my side. Do you have anything? Okay. So good luck for the upcoming concluding sort of presentation tomorrow that you have. And that's it from my side. We are ending the stream here.